trying to get in and tries to log me into somebody's lesson. I don't want to get into somebody else's lesson. I really don't. I don't know what that problem was. Oh, hello, Isaac. You've joined the meet as well. Good on you. So what we're going to do is we'll do the old-fashioned way where I will project the slides here. All right. And we'll see if we can cope with that. There is a bit of note-taking today. You will need to make some notes. All right. We are, as you saw the other day, we were looking at the spectrum. Okay. And we were discussing the idea that you could have levels of competition along that spectrum. So that's where we finished off the other day, and that's where we're going to pick up again today. All right. Now, Charles, did you jump into the meet yesterday? Into the Nearpod yesterday. Yeah. How did you do that? So you joined? Okay. So you were in there. What were you supposed to be doing that time? Because all of a sudden I saw your name and thought, you're not in this class. What's going on? All right, then. Okay, thank you. All right. Did I send it to the wrong classroom?
I think that's why you clicked on it.
That will be why. That will be why. All right. So what I'll need to do, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is I will need to present my screen. Like this. And then hopefully Google will be working so that I can do this. Oh, no, oh, let me just change that again. Then I'll need to throw it up onto the screen. It feels like a very old-fashioned way to do this, but grateful this is still working. Otherwise, if this wasn't working, well, I tell you, we'd be back to me writing on the board. That wouldn't be fun. All right. Come on. So it should appear on the screen. There it is. Whew. All right. So virtual team, you will still be able to see this, and I'm recording the lesson, so that should all work that way. We won't have the Nearpod editions, which is a shame, but we will catch up with the Nearpod perhaps another day. We'll see how we get on. All right. So as I said, we're going to be starting off the idea here that we picked up from the other day. Come on. Yeah. Competition. All right. So one of the major themes in all of economics is this idea of competition. So it's not just the idea that you might consider with regards to sports, etc., but we're also thinking more academic pursuits. All right. It is also about businesses and how they might compete with each other. Okay. And yes, there are, as you're probably very much aware, arm wrestling competitions. You can be a professional arm wrestler. And the weirder one is the one where it is a professional slapping game. All right, where they try and slap the person and then the other, and as long as they stay standing, you know, all right, they might fall over. So there are lots of unusual types of competition that you can find. In business, when we're talking competition, we're talking about the sale of the products, who is selling more of the products, who is earning more profits, who has the bigger market share. When we link that to this particular idea here, we think about what's called the perfect level of competition. All right, so not just any level, perfect competition. Okay. So if our business was to be perfectly competitive, it needs to have certain key criteria. characteristics, features, right? Ways we can identify. So the first way is that there has to be a lot of them. So if it helps to think about those market stalls. If you've gone to like the wet markets or the big fruit and vegetable markets, right? You'll see stall after stall after stall, all selling pretty much exactly the same thing. And that's going to be more along the lines of what we're thinking about when we're talking about perfect competition. There are so many businesses, but none of them are going to be able to influence the price. Not one. Right? They're all, therefore, going to be small businesses, like the market stall. If your business, right, so Isaac's business, was to decide to increase its price because he's selling exactly the same product as Lynn's company, right? All the customers would immediately go to Lynn's company because it's cheaper. All right? And I don't know if you've experienced that. If you have gone to those sorts of markets where there's stall after stall, and you've seen a product and thought, yeah, that's too expensive. I wonder how expensive it is next door. Because it's the same thing. Yeah? Okay? Yeah? I've gone to quite a few of those. Right? If you've been to, there's a country called Thailand you might be aware of. And one of the places in Thailand that's quite touristy is a street. I'm trying to remember the name of the street now. It's, yeah, well, there's that too, but there is also a street, and I'm trying to remember the name of the street now. It's escaping me. But it is very touristy. All tourists go there. It's market stalls, and and a lot of them are selling exactly the same thing. Right? T-shirts, 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 yeah? And that's where you'll also find like scorpions on a stick and, you know, all of those sorts of things, so you can have your photo taken with it, yeah? All of that sort of idea. When we were there, at any rate, that was also where you could buy yourself a university degree from one of the market stalls, or a passport, or a driver's license, right? That was the place, yeah? It was quite an interesting one to go to, but there was that case where you saw the T-shirt in that shop, and then you thought to yourself, well, if I go to the next door shop, maybe it's a cheaper price. Yeah. So lots of sellers, none can influence the price. If one business increases its price, then all customers will go to the competitor. So therefore, each business has actually only got quite a small market share. One of the next ones is quite difficult to achieve. It's the idea of that there is no cost to you. It is free, as if you want to set up shop, it is free. You can just do it. Done. You're a business. All right? It is free to enter and also free to exit. If you decide, no, this is too much, I want to leave, then that's free as well. Okay? Now, part of that involves the idea of administration costs, and you might have rules and regulations. You might need to sign a whole bunch of forms and get permits and all of that. But just think about yourselves. Probably a number of you have already got YouTube channels. You've probably started thinking about how you might monetize them. Yeah? No? All right. Because if you look at what's actually on the YouTube, okay, think of the people who are reviewing TV shows and movies and songs, and they're being paid for that. That's their job, which is quite an unusual concept, I think, but seems to be quite natural and normal for you all. Yeah? There are people who do like tutorials online. I think that's a really good idea. It's something I've tried before rather unsuccessfully, is to get students to do videos about basketball. Hasn't worked in the past, admittedly. I only tried it like twice. Okay? So that they explain the skill. right, that they're wanting to demonstrate, then they demonstrate it, and it's filmed, and then that's the little package that then you put up online. Because when you do go online and you're looking for videos about basketball, in this particular case, you quite often see the adults, you see the coaches, you don't necessarily see the actual players. And for a lot of basketball players, at least at the schools that I've been at, seeing another teenager explaining the skill to them would be much more useful and beneficial. Am I standing in the way? All right. Okay. All right. So it's free. And with the advent of online businesses, potentially even more free than it could have been before. If you've ever used this, you've probably heard of it, something called Shopee.
Oh, yes.
Yeah? Well, it turns out that pretty much anybody can jump onto Shopee and sell something. And there's a software program that you can use that controls your shop on Shopee. So you don't have to worry about all of that part of it. The software does it all for you. It's quite clever. We've actually considered it. Yeah. I've got an idea. Okay? I want to make a T-shirt with economics imagery and stuff on it, and I'd like it to be AR, so that you look at it and you film it and it does the AR things, which I need to learn what that all is, but that looks really cool. Okay, and then have like the QR codes that then link to the sites and all of those other sorts of things as well. I think that would be kind of cool, and I reckon that would be a good selling thing to have, but that's for the future. Now, the products that we sell also are going to need to be identical. They need to be the same, because as soon as there's a difference, you're able to charge a different price. But if the products are all exactly the same, then you can't charge a different price, because as we said before, somebody will just go to the next person down the road. Now, the science word that we use for something that is all the same is that one, homogeneous, right, like milk. Okay, all the same. Okay. We also have got to assume, and this is another big one, that the buyers and sellers, the consumers and the producers, have perfect information. Picture yourself in one of these markets. Do you know exactly what the product is? Do you know exactly how it works? Do you know all of the ins and outs of it? Have you been to a restaurant and thought to yourself, what's actually gone in this food? Well, maybe, but what additives did they put in there? What extra, no? And you might be able to find out. Sometimes they can put these sorts of things online, sometimes. Yeah, I mean, in New Zealand, there's a rule and a regulation about how much of your meat pie has to legally be meat in order for it to be classified as a meat pie. Yeah? Yes. Absolutely. Right? There's so much sugar in the bread at Subway that it could be classified as cake. All right? Now, we know those sorts of things have happened because I might have told you this already before. I apologize if I have, but the McDonald's hamburger, right, the pickle that's in the McDonald's hamburger, right, the only reason that's there is because if it wasn't there, then that would be legally classified as a confectionery, a sweet, because that's how much sugar is in it. So you need to have perfect information. The producer needs to know about you as well. Because sometimes if you've ever anybody tried to sell anything before? Yes, I have. Yeah? And you don't know what their intentions are. You don't know how much money they have. Yeah? Oh, no, that's a bit much. Oh, can you give us a discount? Come on. Yeah? Paydays along the way. Yeah? What is it I tried to sell something online. I tried to sell a drone and got bombarded with people wanting to buy it. It was just quite frightening, to be perfectly honest. And it was, the phrase used was best price laugh. Best price laugh. Yes, that's that one. Yeah. All right. Has anybody entered, have I talked to you about text and win competitions?
What?
Text and win competitions. You know how you have your cell phone?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well, a little while ago, Coca-Cola, who were very good at this, right, printed on the outside of their cans that if you texted a certain code to them, you'd win a prize. And sometimes the prize was actual money. Other times the prize was free Coca-Cola, you know, all of that sort of idea. I did it a few times. I actually won some free Coca-Cola. It was quite cool. Right? However, what I had actually done was this. I had given Coca-Cola my cell phone number. Yeah? And not only that, I'd also told them, because I'd sent them the code, what product I had bought. Coca-Cola will have records as to where it was sold. They will be able to look at the time that the message was sent. They can do a rough approximation about all of those sorts of things. When did I buy it? Right? Then they have all of that information that they previously didn't have. So that you, when you walk past a shop, your phone goes bleep, bleep, and you look at your phone, and it tells you on your phone, oh, look, Coca-Cola have got a special. How did they know I was walking past it? Oh. Right? Your phones have got GPS chips in them that can track you to within 10 meters. So if the business has that information, they can use it. Yeah? But the ingredients within products, we don't necessarily know what they all are or what they even all mean, or what the long-term implication of them is. Yeah? Good stuff. Right? Chlorine. Got to be good for you. Surely. Magnesium carbonate. That sounds like it's fun.
Very delicious. Yeah, very delicious. Carbonate?
Yeah.
Very nice. Metallic. There's chlorine in it.
Yeah. It's also got sodium bicarbonate. That sounds fun.
Again, it's what makes it fizzy.
Always useful to have pantothenic acid. Never know when that'll come in handy.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't have perfect information, but if we did, yeah, then our level of competition would be perfect. Now, the point of this is that the government wants competition. The government is going to say competition is good. So therefore, this being perfect competition, that's what the government's going to want. So it's going to try and move businesses towards this. So because it's got these criteria here, you're going to be able to, as the government, say, okay, many buyers and sellers. Well, we don't have enough of those. Let's create more. Yeah. They're all free to enter and exit. Let's get rid of the rules and regulations. We can do all of that. Yeah. Products should be identical. We could put rules and regulations about what kinds of products could be sold. All right. Perfect competition. Now, you're absolutely right in thinking to yourself that there pretty much is going to be no real-life example that matches that. And you're right. You can come close. Okay? So those market stalls are a good one. Some things online, potentially, might be close. How about this then? What happens if there are no barriers to entry in the market and one firm is making a profit? So let's go back to our example before.
So in this case, other firms would be motivated to try and join the market as well, because the profit attracts
Absolutely. Well done. Rock star. All right. Yes. You're absolutely right. The idea of a prophet is like a traffic light signal, telling other people to go. Yeah. There's an opportunity that has presented itself in the market. Yeah. Professional arm wrestler. Yeah. There's an opportunity in the market to earn profits. There's no barriers to enter the market. So you want money, you enter it. Right? So Isaac's business is making a profit. Lynn's business sees that he's making a profit. Oh, heck, I'm getting in there. He can't have all of that. What's the problem, though? More and more businesses start joining. What happens to the profits? Has to be spread out. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So one of the rules that we say is that over time, all of those profits are going to basically disappear, more or less. They're going to be spread so wide that they will disappear. There's also no barrier to exit. Right? So if Isaac's firm was not making a positive profit, but making a negative one, i.e. a loss, there's nothing to stop him from leaving. He can just say, oh yeah, had enough of that, go. Yep. All right, I'm working through some documents at the moment, and when I finish them, I will share them with you. I'm working on a new site, which when I finish with it, I will share it with you. And it is all about your mid-course exam. I tell you, I have received official confirmation that yes, it is going ahead, your mid-course exam. And yes, the plan is to go ahead at the time that they were saying it was going to go ahead, because I was thinking that they might push it back, but no, they're not. Right? At this point, your mid-course exam is still going to be live in person. However, I have asked what happens to the people who are virtual learners. They're working that out today, so I'll have an answer hopefully later on today as to what happens to those. Right? Okay. Whether we put it on exam.net and try and run it at the same time, or I don't know. We'll have to figure something out. Okay, so that's what happens. When the business is making a profit, a whole lot of other businesses jump on board because there's an incentive for them to do so. They share out the profit amongst all of those businesses. So the more that arrive, the more that the profits get shared out, and eventually the profits all disappear. There is a little bit more to it than that. There is a little bit of maths. There is a little bit of graphical analysis. You don't have to do that. Okay? You will when you're taking IB economics. Right? So in, what is that, a year and a half's time, when you're taking IB economics, yes, you will be doing it. Right? Now, as I said to the other class, I'm trying to remember if I said it to you guys or not. The year 11s have officially finished their course. So they're done. They're doing revision now. So in a year's time, that's you. Yep. All right. Now, here's why economists really like this idea of perfect competition, because it links in with another major theme in economics, and that theme is efficiency. Economists love efficiency. If things aren't efficient, we get a bit twitchy, and we want to fix it. We make it more efficient. Right? Which is, you know, I love these things. White cards. Brilliant. What an amazing invention. This is what I've been wanting to happen for a long, long time. All right? Back in the days of New Zealand, when, you know, trying to get a computer in your classroom was a bit of a challenge, this is what I was saying we needed. All right? You guys just turn up to school, bleep, bleep, you're registered. Yeah? Well done. All right? In the old days, when I was teaching a long, long time, you had to write your name. We had to write your name in a book. Right? Had to use little codes marking off how many half days you'd been at school.
No, I was thinking of
Right? And then we had another code, which was the letter A, if you were absent. But we couldn't write the letter A firstly, we had to put a dot, just in case you turned up late, in which case we had to write a little L. Yeah, but only in the half. And then we had to count up all of the half days and put a number in the column per term, and then per year. It was a whole exercise that we were doing. Can you imagine having to do all of that? It's just silly. Bleep, you're there. Done. Want to order some food? Bleep. Want to buy some school uniform? Bleep. Done. Much more efficient. And as said, economists love the idea of perfect competition because it's efficient. Right? Perfectly competitive firms should offer lower prices to consumers. Should. There should be more choice. Admittedly, you say choice, but it's the same product, but still, more choice. Yeah. But there is no guarantee that you will like what they have to offer. It's just that there will be a lot of it. So this idea of efficient business structures is why economists will help governments to try to design how to make businesses more efficient. So the government comes along and says, we want to put rules and regulations on business. And economists will say, well, if you do that, it's going to be less efficient. How about you do it in this way? There is not enough competition in this particular industry. Well, maybe you should subsidize other people to start up a business in that industry. Costs a bit of money, but yeah. We okay with that one? Then we need to go to the other end of the spectrum. And we need to say, what happens if there is no competition? Zero competition. You are the only one. Okay? Bonus points if you know who that is. Yes? Who? Yes, that's absolutely right. She still is the world champion, the number one, the best in the world at throwing shot put. All right? Has been for a number of years now. There's no effect. I mean, I'm not saying that she hasn't been competing. I'm just saying that in New Zealand, there's no competition with her. She throws it. And everybody goes, yeah? So it's probably not a big surprise that that's her little brother. Right? Who you might recognize, because that is who? Who's that one? I don't know. Yes, it's another Adams, absolutely. Stephen Adams. Yeah. Right? One of the strongest guys in the NBA. Now, in New Zealand, I've met both. Okay? Yeah. One of my high school teams played against the team that Stephen Adams was in, and we got soundly beaten. Right? Stephen Adams is over 7 feet tall. Okay? His sister is, what, about 6'8", 6'9", something like that. She came to the school for a meeting, and I was trying to show her around. It was quite surreal. Okay. We had a centre in that team that time. We had a really good centre. His name was Nick. And he was about 6'3", 6'4". And Stephen Adams dunked over the top of him. Just leapt over him. Right? So much so, it was so spectacular that there is actually a YouTube video of Stephen Adams dunking over Nick in high school. Sorry? He would have been about 16, I think. Sorry?
Stephen Adams dunking over
Nick. N-I-C-K, in high school. Right? You find it? Yeah, that would be a good thing. No, this is on it. Yeah, that's okay. Oh. It is, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Alright. That's an Ang move if ever I saw one, yeah? Alright. So the idea is that yes, just like in the real world where there are some people for whom there's just no competition at all, right? Steph Curry, 3-point shooting contest winner, surprise, yeah? There is no real competition for some people. There is also, in some industries, no real competition for those businesses. None. So how many businesses are there in it? So in a market, if you have a business and you have no competition, how many businesses are in the market? One. Yeah. Right? There is one poly, one parrot. It is a monopoly. Right? Right? So a monopoly is a very specific type of market structure. Now, we tend to, again, it's the extreme. Okay, you had perfect competition at one end, then you go all the way along the spectrum to the other. The complete opposite is a monopolist. There's just one of them. Now, quite often we say that businesses behave like a monopoly. So it may be that there is more than one business in the market. It's just that there are some who are so big and so dominant that they actually behave like a monopoly. These are the things that actually make a monopoly. One of the big things is that they're the opposite, yeah? So there's only one of them. There is also what's called high barriers to entry. It might be that it's just so expensive to get into the market. I don't know if you've got a private plane or two. They're quite expensive things. Yeah. It might be that there are specific laws that say you can't get into that business. Yeah. You know, copyright laws, patent laws, trademarks, all of those sorts of things. Can't do that, somebody else is doing it. Oh, they've got the rights to it. Yeah. It might be that because your business owns the natural resource, the whole lot. Right? Oh, this is our river. We control it. You want electricity, you come to us. Is there a Malaysian example of a monopolist? Gave you a bit of a hint. The river idea. Okay. Yeah. Who controls the water in Malaysia? Yeah. So not a whole lot of competition there. If you are the only person doing that business, you get to set the price. Yeah? It's just like you're the only person in the labour market and everybody wants your service, you get to tell them how much you charge. What's the same idea? Right? If you are the only business that can do what your business does, you set the price. You are the market. There is no market other than you. If the consumer doesn't want your product, they don't get it. So there are some industries that are close. So the ones that are given there is Intel, Okay, they've got about 90% of the computer chip market. Now, yes, that'll probably change because Apple is now making its own computer chips. All right, so that'll change, I'm sure. But at the moment, Intel. And the other one that you've probably heard of there, De Beers, which has got about 90% or so of the world's diamond market. Yeah. Now, I know these days you can actually make diamonds. Okay. So, taking that into account as well. Well, what about this business? Have you heard of this one? YKK. What do they do? Yeah, well done. Just that's fast on the Dr. Google.
Oh,
Absolutely.
oh.
All right.
That's great.
For those of you not as observant as others of you, if you ever get the chance to look at zips, okay, you will see stamped on them the letters YKK. Yeah, you don't have to do that now. Yeah? Named after the company that made them. Pretty much 100% monopoly on zips. Have you heard of a company called IBM? Yeah.
International Foundation.
Used to be called International Business Machines. Yeah. What did they used to make? Yeah, what type? Okay. You're not far wrong. Yeah. Gosh, you guys are young. What did IBM used to make? For a while, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, for a while, this was one of the biggest companies in the world. The fact that you've never heard of it is quite amazing to me. Yeah, it was. It was one of the biggest companies in the world. And one of the reasons why it was one of the biggest companies in the world, because at the time it was the only one producing what? Is Dr. Google that slow all of a sudden? No? Yes. Computers. Right, usually of the desktop variety. Right? They were the first ones, pretty much. They had an absolute global stranglehold on the computing market. They were, as said, one of the biggest companies in the world. For quite a long time, comparatively speaking. Right? The one thing that kept them where they were is this idea here that we've got written up, this idea of what's called a patent. They owned the rights to the technology of the computer. It's our computer. We make it. Of course, it wasn't long before other technology companies started to figure out how to do it. And because they made them slightly differently, they weren't breaking the patent. So all of a sudden, you had an absolute flood in the market of what were called IBM clones. And yes, Star Wars fans in the room, it has been classified as a clone war. It actually drove IBM right out the market. Because after the clones came out, another company started up, just a small one, called Apple. And IBM was done. All right, IBM now produces, they still make computers, but they make computers of a specific type. They make the really, 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 really big ones. Right? I think there's like 2 companies in the world that make these types of computers. These are the computers that are in research labs working out the history of the universe sort of idea, working out how fast an atom spins, you know, all of those sorts of things. Those computers, right? The ones that Garry Kasparov tried to beat in chess, yeah, those computers. The ones that will probably one day solve all of the problems, hopefully. We have, yeah. So they invented those computers, and then they sold off. They did have a small laptop type program, and they sold that off to a Chinese company called Lenovo, which you might have heard of. Okay. Lenovo, Lenovo.
Oh.
Yeah.
That one. Oh.
Right, so they sold all of their entire run of computers off to them. They make them now. IBM then rebranded itself as like a helper to businesses, and they go into businesses and try and fix all their problems, which is interesting that they do that. Fascinating history on some of these products and some of these companies. Monopolies. So, all right. Is it possible for a monopolist to keep going into the future? What do you think? Probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Think so?
Like Apple, everyone likes Apple because it's Apple. So people will continue to buy it. That's why they can charge stuff at top price.
Yeah. There would be a certain amount of brand loyalty to it. But if they're the only one in the business, you kind of don't have a choice, yeah? So, I don't know about brand loyalty in that sort of circumstance, but yeah. If they're the only ones in the market, then in theory, yes, they can continue into the future. Yeah, it's one of those things where unless other things change, they will stay the same. And the French used to say the more things change, the more they stay the same. No? French people in the room? No? Nobody? Okay. Some sort of famous French saying that I keep forgetting. That the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now, what about if they're making profits? Are they going to attract other firms to come in? What do you think? There's still the incentive there. They're making the profit. But what's the problem? Yeah, the laws, the patents, all of those barriers to entry that we talked about, that's still there. So, yeah, you can't, as much as you would like to join that business. Yeah. All right, you heard of a guy called Elon Musk? Heard of him? Yeah. It's an interesting chap. He made, what did he make, like $20 billion the other day? In one day? 20 billion. Not million, billion with a B. In one day. Now, he does a particularly different type of business, right? It doesn't matter that his rockets land and explode. Apparently, people will still give him money. Yeah? One of the industries that he's in is batteries. He makes batteries. Very big ones. And apparently at the moment he's trying to set up his batteries to run the entire state of Texas. He was the one who flew out some big batteries out to Puerto Rico to try and help them with their energy crisis after the storm. Next slide. All right. Okay. Now, there are all sorts of reasons why, or all sorts of different barriers, as you see. Okay, yes, brand loyalty. Yeah, you can say that. Geographical barriers, who can get there, right? There's that one, which I might have told you about already, the troll. Have I told you about the troll? The world's largest oil rig, oil exploration rig, is called the Troll, Troll. It's enormous, but it is ridiculously expensive. It is huge, right? It is apparently the biggest vehicle we've ever made, right? But if you don't have that, well, how are you going to drill for oil, you know? If you can't get to where the oil is, then, yeah. Being the first mover, you know, the Facebook, he was in college and he was thinking, wouldn't it be a cool idea to, you know, have some sort of networking system where we could talk to our friends? That'd be kind of cool. And the Facebook, as it was known back then, was created. Yeah? But it was the first, basically, the first of its kind. And because no one else was doing it, I mean, you think about all of those people who have got YouTube channels. I was looking at one the other day from one of the guys I recommend for economics, a teacher in America called Jacob Clifford. That does some very good, very funny economics ones. You've seen a couple already. He's been doing economics videos on YouTube for over 11 years. I saw some of the first ones. Yeah. 11 years. Being some of the first people to say, hey, this would be a good idea. Why don't we do that? Yeah. Of course, you have to have the idea, admittedly. The idea that you can bring a whole lot of businesses together and make them one, and then become a powerful business as a result of that. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. Can I move on?
Yep.
Now, one of the temptations, right, is to think that monopolies are all bad. Because we tend to do that, because we say we want to move towards perfect competition, so we want to move away from monopolies. Yeah, we want to consign monopolies to the board game of history. Yeah, what we want to do. We want perfect competition because we say it is more efficient. But maybe monopolies aren't all bad. For example, they actually earn economies of scale because of their size. They are so big that they're actually quite efficient on a production point of view. Their costs, on average, will be lower, potentially lower than anybody else's could be. So, one additional thought to the people, you people, right? All of the slides that we go through are also in the site, so you can just grab them all, right, and use them. They're all there. Yes, I do make changes and stuff to them as we go as well, just to tidy them up a bit. If I've forgotten a picture from a previous year, I might remove it, or if I decide I'm going to teach it slightly differently, then I'll change it. Having one business doing it means it is potentially more innovative. Maybe. There's money that could be put into R&D, research and development. Yeah? I told you about IKEA, didn't I? Yeah? It's the world's largest non-profit company. IKEA does not make a profit at all. Zero. Any additional revenue it earns above its costs are immediately plowed back into the business under the heading Research and Development, which they use to figure out how to build more furniture things. Yeah? Or how the people who run IKEA make money? Well, it's a cost then, isn't it? The cost. It's also one of the world's largest private businesses. It is not listed on the stock market. It is also one of the businesses that is still owned by one family. There's not many around like that. The other one is Walmart. If you've heard of Walmart, they're owned by the Walton family, America. They earn like billions of dollars as well. Having just one business means that potentially you could be eliminating wasteful competition. Yeah, I mean, you think about train tracks. Is there any point in having two lines? Yeah, power lines. Do you need competition with power lines? Really? No? Right. And you know, one of the big areas where obviously the world has taken huge leaps forward is the idea of the internet. And everybody seems to think that the internet is quite competitive, but you also have to understand that there are cables that connect country to country, and that's where the data goes. These massive underground cables and underwater cables. It's one of the big issues between America and China at the moment is the undersea data cables. Yeah, they're looking at going. Yeah. So, for example, there's one ginormous big data cable that connects Australia to New Zealand. That's how New Zealand basically gets its internet. Yeah, more or less. So if that cable was to be cut, New Zealand would have no internet, more or less. So there's going to be one of them, potentially. However, it is quite inefficient to have just one business. Resources that just have to go there. They can't be spread amongst different businesses. So that is quite possibly inefficient. If there's no competition, then you're likely to see higher prices for the consumer. And we're not going to like that. And of course, there's that idea of imperfect knowledge. It's a monopolist. We don't know what's actually going on. We don't. Yeah. Now, Apple is a publicly listed company. It's on the stock market. Yeah, it lists a whole bunch of information online. You can find it out. However, you can't find everything out. There will be things that will be secret that only Apple knows. Some things they will tell you, other things they won't. Sometimes they will tell you how many products they've sold, but not how much they earned from them. Other times they'll tell you how much they earned from the product, but not how many they sold. Just depends on what they're looking at that point. And obviously, they've got a whole lot of secret plans for the future of new things they want to do. Now, sometimes you get leaks of that information, but they're going to keep that quite a secret. So you don't know. Yeah. What the iPhone 13 is going to look like, I really don't think they should call it an iPhone 13. I really think the last 2 years we've had, I don't think they should have an iPhone 13. You can call it something else, anything. Yeah? Please. Is it another sign of the apocalypse that the next phone will be an iPhone 13? Yeah. Well, a lot of this is based on the point of view of the firm, yes. Whereas the disadvantages, pretty much that one is the customers and that one is the customers. I mean, if you were the government and you decided you didn't like a monopoly and you were going to go and smash them, yeah, let's break them up into tiny little companies. How would you do that? Because the monopolist knows all the things about the business, but you don't. So it could be that by smashing the business into a whole lot of smaller business, you're actually doing them a favor. They're actually better off because of it. And if you ever get the chance to watch the series The Men Who Built America, all about some of these big businesses and some of these big monopolies that were created and then destroyed, some of the political intrigues around them. You can kind of see where some of the modern history has come from. Right? There's one very famous scene where they broke up Standard Oil and they smashed it into a whole lot of different companies. But the guy who owned it owned shares in all of those companies. So he was actually wealthier after they smashed it all up into bits than he was when it was just one company. So it is very tempting to say that a monopolist is bad, that all monopolies should be stopped, that we should move every business towards the end of the spectrum that is perfectly competitive, but it's not always that simple. Yeah, it is a really good documentary, that one, by the way. Yeah, it's quite fascinating, and there's like really, it shows you the quirks of history. All right, so Rockefeller, who was the Standard Oil guy, he was due to go and have a meeting. This is when he was just starting out. He had very little money. His business was doing, pretty poorly. Okay, and he was due to have a meeting with this very high-powered business person who was going to basically save his business. And he missed the train to go to the meeting. But the train crashed and the people on it died. So he was not on that train. He then had to come the next day on a different train. But as a result of that train crashing and those people dying, he saw himself as being saved from that, and therefore thought to himself, well, therefore I'm going to be successful. Therefore, nobody is going to stop me. Therefore, nothing in my life is going to go wrong because I can't possibly go wrong now. Yeah? And that's how he spent the rest of his life. And he was clever. He really was. Right? When the trains decided to increase the cost for him to ship his oil, thinking that way they could get a better deal from him, he said, nah, tell you what, I'm going to build a pipe that ships the oil all the way from the factory to the people. And so all of those oil pipelines, that came from him. Yeah? Very clever. Rockefeller is his name. There are still Rockefellers around in America that are distant relatives. And if you do go to New York City, you might find the Rockefeller Center, okay, which is obviously named after him. John D. was his name. All right, he was the very famous people, J.P. Morgan. All right, another guy who was around at the same time. All right, now, if we are a monopolist, as said, one of the big, wonderful things about a monopolist is that we might earn from economies of scale. Economies of scale suggest that because we're big, we can get cost savings. Our business is going to be so large, we're producing so many goods that the average cost for us falls. Now, particularly if you're thinking about monopolies that are very capital intensive, they have big machines, but they're able to get their average costs down really low. And nobody is able to replicate that. I mean, a long time ago in America, they built something called the Hoover Dam. You've seen it in movies, a lot of them. At the time, that dam, that hydroelectric power station basically, was the largest infrastructure project in the history of the world. A whole lot of people died actually making it. But because where they fell when they died, it was going to be too difficult and dangerous to get them out, they actually left them there. So it is also an infrastructure where there are a whole lot of, well, basically dead bodies all on the sides of it, which is a bit creepy, I must suggest. But, you know, it is so big, it creates all this electricity and nobody is able to match it with regards to its costs. Because once you've built that, everything else is cheap. Yeah? Once you've paid that initial amount of money, then every unit after that is cheaper. Once you invent the computer, all of the costs involved with the invention, the discovery, all of the failures that you've had along the way, then you sell it, and each additional one that you sell makes you more and more money. It's a costful. Yeah. Brilliant story about Steve Jobs talking about the iPhone. Okay, when they were inventing it. Have I told you the story already? We used to have this device, it was an MP3 player, an iPod, and Apple was selling like 90-something% of the world's MP3 players, right? They owned it. Some were tiny, some were very big, right? The very big ones had a rotating wheel, right? So when you wanted to select your song, it went click, 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 and pick the song, okay? Very clever for the time. And originally, Steve Jobs said, I want that in the phone. So you would have had iPhones with the click wheel going click, 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 click. Can you imagine trying to type a message? They worked out pretty quick that wasn't going to work. Yeah? But they did spend months doing the research into how it might work. Yeah? Right? Like something as simple as with Apple, they have these things. They're called, what are they called? Round rects, rounded rectangles, which was a revolution in the computing business, to be able to round the corners in a rectangle. Nobody had been able to work out how to do that, and they spent months and months and months and thousands of dollars doing that, trying to figure out how to do it. But once they'd done it, it's all done. Yeah? It's like the people who build apps that go on the App Store. Once it's built, then you're just selling it. Yeah? So all of that initial cost spreads out over time and eventually becomes 100% profit. It's like the Angry Birds guys. You know, they invented Angry Birds. Those two guys. You know the Angry Bird app? Birds that thing? Yeah? They invented it and they sold it. They sold the app, and I think they were like $1 each, the app, when they first started. Right? And they sold, I think, 15 million within a few weeks of this app at $1 each. So it really didn't matter how much it cost them to make it, because from then on out, everything was profit. And obviously all the sequels, and then they licensed it to the movies and the merchandise and all of those sorts of things as well. All right. Now, yeah, possibly the last thing for the day. We will see how we get on. When we talk about these ideas of economies of scale, we need to identify that there are some economies that are going to be inside the business. The business is going to be able to cause those economies to happen. Other economies of scale are going to be outside of the business's control. So they're going to be labeled external economies. So you're going to have internal economies within the control of the business, and external economies outside of the business's control. Right? External diseconomies of scale, they're going to cause the average cost to rise, and they're also going to be outside potentially of the control of the business. So there are a few of them that we're going to look at. Right? So the idea, if you're an economy of scale, you're either caused by something that's happening inside the business, so an internal economy, or you're being caused by something that's happening outside of the business, and that would be classified as an external economy of scale. And they're outside of your control. You have no control over them. They're external. However, people like the government they have some influence over it, the external ones. Absolutely. All right, do you feel up to doing one more, or do you want to finish there for the day? Finish there for the day?
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, now, just to be mindful, I jump out of the air, and jump back to, yeah. All right, so just to be mindful, all right, that was a lot of theory that we went through. Okay, now yes, when you do IB, there is more to it than that. There's also a little bit of maths and a little bit of graphs, etc., potentially that you will need to look at. But you don't need to. All right, a lot of what you are going to do with this is exactly what we did there, which was talk about them, identify them, what are the characteristics of them, maybe find some real life examples, possibly, but it's about evaluating them, the advantages and disadvantages of them. So if the government says we need to smash these monopolies, is that a good idea or not a good idea? If the government is trying to increase competition, what is that likely to lead to? That sort of an approach. Right, so that's what we're going to be thinking about as we move forward. We're also going to be looking at the businesses that you have discovered, your case studies. We're going to talk about how they could grow as a business. The implication of them growing might be an implication on competition. Okay, so maybe then the government says, aha, right, with regards to it. Yeah. So that can be considered potentially as well. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, please review those concepts before we meet again. Obviously, we'll be seeing you on Monday, the day of the moon. All right. He says, yes. Other than, no, you're departing these shores, so I hear. Like the hairdressers of old. Yeah. Shanghai. What school in Shanghai? What school? British International School, Shanghai. Yeah, I wondered because I wondered if you were going to Dulwich. There's a school in Shanghai called Dulwich College, Shanghai, but it's a different school to that one. Because we know somebody who's there. So I would have told you to look out for them.
Doesn't she go to like a...
Right. Is the whole family moving? The whole family moving?
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Right, understand. So that's a big shift, that's a big change. Yeah, quite exciting. Yeah, they don't. Well, you'll find it a piece of cake.
That's what I love.
You'll wipe the floor. Business done. All right, straight A. Yeah. Well, all the best. All right, do keep in touch, obviously, with us all, your team. All right, we'll think about you. Yeah. Otherwise, team, as we would say in the land of my birth, hey Kornera, which means goodbye for now. There is pink stuff here. It's hiding this bottle. There is blue stuff for your hands and towels for the desks. Otherwise, have a fantastic day. Have a good weekend. If I don't see you before. Goodbye. See you. Bye, Andy. See you. Then.